Is your investment results a victim of your employer trying to avoid any liability whatsoever when they offer you options in their retirement plan that they're providing to you? When you look at some of these numbers, it's really going to jump out at you just how staggering the gap in performance is for what's become really one of the biggest rages out there over the past few years. And what we're talking about, of course, is target date funds. So what are they, how they work, how they get to be so popular, more importantly, what's the relative performance? We're going to tackle all of that in this segment on the program. Welcome, of course, to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you on 96.9 The Game, along with News Radio Orlando Network. Plus, of course, this podcast, one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web, with over 13,000 downloads of our episodes. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciary stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So these target date funds, I'm sure if you've looked at your lineup of available investment options in whatever it is that your employer offers to you, whether it's a 401k, a 403b, a 457 deferred comp, any of those options that the employer offers, what you'll probably see is that half or maybe over half of the available investment options are all these target date funds. And they're the funds that have like a target date, and then they have a number after them. So it's like, might be like 2030 fund or 2050 fund or 2060 fund. And how they're supposed to work is that the number in them represents a year, and that year is supposed to be matched with what your expected retirement date is. So let's say you're 30 years of age and you plan on retiring in 30 years, then today you would look to be picking like a 2050 kind of fund. That's sort of how they're supposed to work. And in fact, a lot of retirement plans offered by employers these days will default you into that. Like if you don't make a choice, it'll automatically look at your date of birth and then boom, match you up to whatever year it is or close to whatever year it is when you would turn age 65. So these have become all the rage, they become all of the default. And as you might well expect, the closer you get to that year, right? So like 2050 is designed, or supposed to be designed, keyword there, supposed to be designed, to generate more of a return, be more growth oriented, if you will, versus a 2030 fund. Okay, well, that's 10 years away, so maybe that starts to shift to maybe like a growth in income, get a little bit more conservative, get a little bit more bonds in there, and then like a 2020 fund would be much more on the bond side of things. But if you've got a number of years out, 2030 or 2040 or 2050, or even some of the funds out there now that are 2060, you should expect all those types of funds to be predominantly on the stock side of things. So that helps to give a little bit of perspective of what these funds are and sort of how they work. The problem is that these funds are supposed to sort of help you through the selection process. The reality is that they were invented really to reduce down the employer liability. So the employer could say, well, wait a minute, you had a prepackaged option that you could have gone into. The reality is that these prepackaged options, these target date funds, have a tendency to be much more conservative than you would expect them to be at these earlier years. And in fact, a lot of those funds where you think 2030 fund, you look at your lineup, right? You got like 11 different of these target date funds in your 401k as part of the investment options, or your 403b as part of the investment options, right? You look at them all and you're like, wait a minute, that's a bunch of different funds, right? I got a 2010 or 2020, or usually the 2010s when the years roll off, they refer to them as the income fund. So you got the income fund, you got 2020, 2025, 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, 2050, 2055, 2060, maybe even there's a 2065 fund in there. Okay, so hey, there's my lineup, right? I got 11 different funds. It sounds like I got a bunch of different things to choose from. Here's the crazy part. If you look at pretty much all of the funds north of 2030, and we did this analysis with a major provider, probably the largest provider of target date funds in the industry, okay? And we looked at every one of those funds from 2030 on. 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, 2050. I'm not gonna go through that now again, but it's like 8 different funds, right? So what was crazy when you look at that, you think, oh, those are 8 different funds, right? You look at the performance over the course of the past 5 years, and on those 8 different funds, supposed to be different, they're all got different, years on them. The 5-year annualized return was either 8.6 or 8.61. Stop and think about that. Got 8 different funds, all targeted to different years. Over the course of the past 5 years, basically the performance is within 1/100th of a point on an annualized basis over the course of the past 5 years. Folks, those are the same thing. That's the same thing. When performance is within 1/100th of a point, that's the same thing. So what are you getting with all these different funds? Oh, and by the way, here's the really tragic part of it. Let's say you're looking at those funds 2030 on out to 2065. That should be a pretty growth approach, right? I mean, if you're planning to retire in 2040, that's 20 years away. You should probably be pretty market oriented, right? 2060, be pretty market oriented. But the real problem now is in the performance. So if you just take a look at like an S&P 500 index fund, right? We're talking about the S&P 500 in the prior segment hitting new high. And if you look at the S&P 500, over the course of the same 5 years, the annualized return on the S&P 500, 11.7. But every one of my outlier target date funds, 2030 and beyond, up to 2060, 2065, was at 8.6. So here you are, you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to take money out of your paycheck, you're trying to put it into your employer retirement plan, you're trying to do all those things the way that you need to do to save for your retirement, and you're just getting screwed. No other word for it. Because if you're using a 2040 fund or a 2050 fund and the performance is basically exactly the same, but the performance is only 75%, 25% less than what you would get just by owning an S&P 500 index, holy mackerel, that is a dramatic impact on your retirement and how much you're going to have later on. So folks, I understand that that's probably the majority of the investment options that are available to you in your employer retirement plan, but there's some things that you've got to do to avoid this massive underperformance that is happening when people use target date funds. Because they're all the same once you go past 2030. You look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. If there's a variation of only 1/100th of a point on 8 different funds that are supposed to track over a 35-year period of time, it's the same thing. You've got to look at the other options. Here's what you can do. First and foremost, if you no longer work for that company, or if you're over 59 and a half and you still work for them, you probably have the option to roll that money out to an IRA that will allow you to choose from all of the available investment options that are out there, from the entire universe, if you will. From that universe, you got some work to do to thin down to make sure you're owning the right stuff, but at the end of the day, that's going to be a much better allocation than the allocation that is only returning 75% of what it should. So if you're no longer employed, easy process, roll it over. If you're over age 59 and a half and still working, most employers in today's world will give you the option to do what is known as an in-service rollover distribution. That will allow you to escape out of the plan that your employer, in their most magnanimous way, has given you, to something that ultimately you have the control over. If you are stuck, meaning you're under age 59 and a half and you're still working, folks, you've got to look at all of the available options. There still is usually about half a bunch of options, 10, 12 other funds that you've got to look at, that you've really got to look at those choices and select from those other choices that are available in your 401k. You're gonna have to do some homework there for yourself on that. If you use a financial advisor, we would encourage you to talk with them, make sure that they take a look at that, and ultimately help to figure out what the right allocation is for you. And they should, by the way, do that for free, because after all, you're using them for their services. Anyway, we're gonna take a break. When we get back, we will continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents on News Radio WFLA Orlando.